Every single person has been a part of that Goa plan group chat. It used to be a dream to visit the beautiful state of Goa with your best buddies and relive your college days. But now, even if your Goa plan makes it out of the group chat, chances are you wouldn't have a blast because most tourists don't want to go to Goa. The beaches are dirty, the city is unaffordable, and Goans have made it clear that they do not want tourists. And when you look at international destinations like Vietnam and Thailand that are sometimes cheaper than Goa, why would you want to go there? In fact, last month when my best friend suggested visiting the beaches of Goa, I was the one who changed the location to Karnataka given how terrible my Goa experience was. But wait, more on my experience later. The Goan government just reported that tourism in the state was booming. So naturally, some of you might think, you are just making stuff up for views, okay? Is it though? The Goan government reported a 5% increase in tourists, of which foreign tourists increased 29% in 2025. Of course, these sound like great numbers, but they were carefully nitpicked to paint a picture. If you look at the grand scheme of things, in 2019, Goan tourism reached an all-time high with more than 940,000 visitors. And these huge figures that the Goan government reported are 65% lower than this pre-pandemic numbers. So what went wrong? Let's dive in. Back in the 70s, Goa was like India's secret beach destination. Not many people knew about it except for a handful of foreigners. Slowly, a lot more of them started pouring in, including a bunch of hippies. They came for the pristine beaches and stayed for the peace and the vibes. When they went back, they told everyone about it, and soon Goa became the party capital of India. Now, Indians also discovered Goa and the state had a huge influx of tourists. Slowly, beach shacks started popping up, then restaurants, then hotels, and then even huge resorts. The Goan government saw this opportunity and milked the hell out of it. They went all in on tourism, and that is when Goa's economic perils started. Cut to today, the entire state depends only on one industry, tourism. But wait, Goa has so much to offer and the government is making money from it. So what's the problem? How bad can it be? You feel how bad it can be the moment you arrive in Goa. You get out of your flight or your train, the first thing you do is look for an Uber to your hotel. And most tourist destinations in the city, you wouldn't have a problem except in Goa. There is no Uber. The local taxi unions have lobbied to prevent services like Uber and Rapido from entering Goa because it takes away business from the local population. And the reason this works is because the local population has nothing else to do but offer tourism related services. There is no other industry in Goa. And you might wonder, what's wrong with that? Shouldn't the local population reap the benefits of how touristy the state is? But that's not what happens in Goa. What happens is extortion on the streets. People reported having to pay 1,600 rupees for a 10-kilometer cab ride. Another person reported being threatened by a group of taxi drivers who were about to smash his car. What for? He was willing to offer a lift to a random tourist. Another group of tourists were blocked by taxi drivers from entering a rental car that they paid for. In fact, when I went to Goa, I was forced to pay 500 rupees for a 2-kilometer auto ride. I had no option because there was literally no other way to get to the station. Goa's taxi mafia has a simple pitch. If you come here to contribute to our economy, either overpay us or we'll beat you up. Which is why the tourism that was taking Goa ahead started becoming a double-edged sword. And you don't realize the gravity of this. Tourism contributes to 16% of Goa's state domestic product and almost half the population depends on it for a livelihood. Goa gets 6 times its own population in the form of tourists every single year. So now you tell me, if the state has to continue growing, should the government prioritize the interest and well-being of these tourists or the taxi mafia? Even a fool would know that it's obviously the tourist's experience, but despite that, the Goan government came out in support of the taxi mafia and vowed that we would not allow Uber and Rapido-like services to enter the state. Because it's these taxi unions that vote the politicians to power, not the tourists. And the one thing that Goa makes the most money from, tourism, it doesn't do right. The state has poor infrastructure and as a result, it cannot handle these many tourists despite the decline. And get this, the over-tourism problem in Goa has been like this for not 4 but 40 years. Back in 1993, a BBC article spoke about how Goans were extremely unhappy with the rising tourism in the state because one 5-star hotel was consuming as much water as 5 villages. And a person who stayed there consumed 28 times more electricity than the average Goan. And get this, back in 1964, Goa had 2 hotels. Today it has 7,600 with an additional 6,400 guest houses. And this data doesn't even look at the unregistered accommodation. So with all these tourists coming in every single year, one of Goa's biggest problems is not having enough toilets. But wait, before I tell you that, if you learned something new up until this point, please consider subscribing to the channel as that's what keeps us insanely motivated. A Goan newspaper spoke about how the state's pristine beaches are now a hotspot for open defecation. Marine litter in Goa grew 40% over the last 5 years. Despite being India's smallest state, Goa's per capita plastic waste is among the highest in India, which is literally killing Goans. All this burden on the state's waste management system leads to a lot of open burning of waste, and the Lancet published a study which showed that Goa ranked 6th in terms of absolute instances of cancer, with lung cancer being the leading cause of death, and 40% of Goan women diagnosed with this disease were non-smokers. The cause? Pollution. Now, I get it. All this waste isn't just a Goa depending on tourism issue. It's also a civic sense issue on the part of tourists. A lot of tourists, especially Indian ones, act with zero empathy. They'll throw trash on the beaches despite there being a dustbin in sight. And of course, this change starts from within. But think of all the burden it has on the state's natural resources. And this burden extends to the law and order infrastructure as well. Goa hosts so many people every year that the law enforcement agencies are stretched too thin. Look at the data. In 2022, the National Crime Records Bureau reported that Goa had the highest instances of minors being violated in the country, the highest instances of prostitution, a 70% jump in economic offences. The situation got so bad that Goa's chief minister admitted on record that the law and order situation has significantly affected tourism in the state. This becomes a vicious cycle. Tourism brings in a ton of revenue for the state and everyone in the state starts depending on it, and then this excess tourism becomes the reason behind tourism's decline in the state. And now that everyone is dependent on tourism, this decline severely impacts their lives. And all of this is leading to another huge issue: Goa's unaffordability crisis. But before we talk about that, do you have any Goa experiences to share? I'd love to hear about them in the comments. In 2025, right now, the cheapest flight to Goa for a New Year's weekend is 14,000 rupees all the way up to 45,000 rupees. Flying to Bali, Vietnam or Thailand during the same dates is cheaper. Last year, Abhishek flew to Thailand for the same price as a ticket from Delhi to Goa. The same trend could be spotted for local transport, food, hotels, and the Goan transport minister said that, well, all this is fine, but the flight cost is not something in our control. That is driven by demand and supply. The high cost of flights is primarily due to low supply and extremely high demand. Now, operators would be more than happy to start additional flights to Goa if the state was in a better place. Consistently declining tourism over the past 5 years is obviously one of the reasons why they aren't keen on taking that risk. Similarly, hotel tariffs are also on the rise. The Goans depend only on tourism, so every time an outsider decides to set up shop and start a hotel or an Airbnb, the locals demand exorbitant rents from them. As a result, all these rising costs are passed on to the customer. We know it's demand and supply, but bro, you are the government. You need to manage it. It's gotten so bad that Goa's transport minister, the ministry responsible for keeping the taxi mafia happy, by the way, admitted that it was cheaper to go abroad as opposed to coming to Goa. It's almost as if Goa has a partial rebranding going on as a premium destination. I say partial because the pricing is premium, but the experience isn't even close. Imagine paying 30,000 rupees for a premium beachfront villa, and the first thing you see when you wake up is people everywhere. Okay, but real talk. Before we discuss solutions on what Goa can do to fix this, let's talk about why I am making this video. In the words of Goa's tourism ministry, I am just trying to defame the state. But in reality, I'm just sad. The first ever trip that I took in my life was Goa. I was just one and my parents describe it as heaven on earth. And last year when I visited Goa, again what I saw was very different than what my parents described back in the day. Everywhere I went I was fleeced by hotel owners, taxi mafia, auto drivers. The place was unclean, unsafe, smelly. If I had to describe my experience in one word, it would be horrible. I spoke about this on my Instagram story and the people from Goa started replying to me. They said, if you don't like it, don't come. Stop defaming our state. Well, it's not defamation if it's true. And granted, this was my experience. I'm not alone. All the data is right there. The first step to solving a problem is admitting that it exists. So, if we are to make Goa great again, there's a couple of things we can do. Let's start by asking a question and working backwards. Why are people ditching Goa in favor of Vietnam or Bali? It's simple. Those places are safer, cheaper and cleaner. These three words are the solution. For starters, fix the taxi problem. The bullying has to stop. You cannot let tourists be treated like this because you fear the taxi unions and your population has nothing else to do. If the tourist feels scared of getting stabbed or beaten up, as soon as they enter Goa, they won't come. And these very taxi unions know better than anyone else what would happen if the people stopped coming to Goa. As paradoxical as it sounds, if Goa needs to succeed, it needs to reduce its dependence on tourism in the benefit of everyone, including tourists. With 45% of people dependent on tourism, there is an apocalypse waiting to happen. A small drop in tourist numbers and thousands of Goans lose their livelihoods. Goa desperately needs to diversify, and all this would even reduce the bullying that happens on every single front. Currently, Goans demand huge rents from outsiders if they try to set up a business in Goa because they have nothing else to do. All this has a direct impact on safety and tourism, and along with this, Goa also needs better infrastructure. Plenty of dustbins and toilets need to pop up if the beaches have to be aesthetic again. And of course, if you want Goa to have a premium vibe, make the experiences premium. Incentivize businesses that create resorts, offer cultural experiences that make people feel connected to Goa. 500 rupees for a 2-kilometer auto ride or 10,000 rupees a night for a small room by the beach isn't premium. That wouldn't attract quality spending tourists. Maybe this would be a first step towards a new Goa, one that is associated with beautiful culture, pristine beaches and not just cheap alcohol. But that's just me. What do you think about this? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, and if you learned something new from this video, consider subscribing to the channel as that's what keeps us insanely motivated.